Football-wise, you mentioned 247, I guess, has got some preseason rankings out, and I guess it's got people talking, and the Bears are at number 5, I guess, according to these rankings.
Yeah, I guess it's CBS Sports rankings, and 247 did an article on it with their take on the rankings, I suppose, is kind of how that worked out. And the Big 12 had 4 teams inside the top 20. So it was Oklahoma State at 20, Texas at 17, Baylor at number 5, and Oklahoma at number 4. The top 5 go Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Baylor. I guess my first takeaway, and judging by you kind of laughing, is Oklahoma should not be number 4 in the nation.
Number 4? Like,
what are we doing?
Like, I mean, I'm as unbiased as it's going to get here, in terms of I don't have a hatred for Oklahoma, quite the opposite. So, maybe unbiased isn't the word, but I don't know. I think I'm pretty fair with the teams that I like. I don't, gloss over weaknesses, and some people can be very ignorant with their teams. I'm very realistic with the teams that I follow. That is a ridiculous ranking for Oklahoma, number 4. That is absurd. That is way too high.
I agree with you. I mean, the track record of Big 12 coaches getting a first-year head coach is not great. I think there's probably a better chance that Oklahoma goes 8-4 than they are number 4 in the entire country.
I would just like to know the rationale behind that, and I'm sure they have a nice little paragraph written that explains it. I don't need to see it, but I mean, yeah, man, a coaching change. I get that. Oh, cool, it's Levy's offense, and he knows Dylan Gabriel. Okay, but Dylan Gabriel's a step down from what they had last year at quarterback
by a lot.
I can't even tell you some of their skill guys at this point because most of them are living in Los Angeles now, or were drafted like a Kennedy Brooks. Defensively, yeah, I'm sure they're going to be better with Brent Venables in charge, but I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at that tells me that's the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah, the paragraph is not. It's literally not explaining it at all. It's like
so it's BS, basically.
Much of their worth hinges on Brent Venables' defense in year 1, along with the progression of UCF transfer Dylan Gabriel. It has nothing to do with, this is a great part of their team, or, this is something that they're going to excel at. I'm just so confused by this because I think if you're ranking Oklahoma right now, I don't know how you have them, honestly, inside the top 10. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think they can compete in the Big 12 if everything goes perfectly, but just the track record, it's going to be very hard for Brent Venables, a first-year head coach, to step in there and have the same success that Oklahoma's had over the past few years. Not to mention, Lincoln Riley took a lot of their team. They're kind of installing a new way of going about things. They're trying to be more defensive-oriented with Brent Venables. I just feel like those things take a little bit of time. And so to me, having them at 4 is pretty awful, even though I do think they will be, a top 3 or 4 team in the Big 12. That doesn't correlate to being a top 4 team in the country.
No, that's a ridiculously high rating that really has no merit behind it whatsoever. I mean, that doesn't have a logical explanation for them being number 4 when you could look at so many other teams. I don't even like Baylor at 5. I think that's too high in my opinion, but I would take them at 5 over the Oklahoma ranking at number 4. I just don't get that. Top 25, top 15 even, sure, yeah, but top 4, no. Now, as far as Baylor at number 5, that seems kind of high, man. I understand they got a lot coming back. I understand that people think they could be better than next year, but, man, I'm going to have to see it, dude. That was a special collection of talent and a special chemistry and a years in the making roster. I don't think you just simply plug and play. Now, am I saying I don't think they can win 10 games again or 10-plus games again or the Big 12 again? No, I think they can do all of those things, but I don't know that I would be confident at top 5 in the country right now at this point. I still got a lot of questions about this offense before I get into top 5 talk.
Yeah, I mean, this is the highest ranking I've seen all offseason so far, post-spring kind of
Who did
reaction.
These rankings?
Yeah,
I don't want to rake anybody over the coals. Never mind. Don't worry about it.
It was CBS, but I just think for Baylor, though, it's so interesting because, yes, I do think when you look at the number 5 ranking, you go, man, that might be too high, right? But I also am looking at the teams around them, and I'm like, well, okay, so you got Michigan at 6. I mean, okay, maybe Michigan's better than Baylor. I don't know that that's a given. At 7, you have A&M. Again, A&M, really? I don't know if they're better than Baylor. Then you look at 8, you got Notre Dame, maybe. First year, This is Marcus Freeman's first full season, so who knows? Maybe they're better than Baylor. And then you got Utah and Arkansas. I'm taking Baylor over both of them. That's your top 10. I mean, it's not that crazy to think about. If you're going to have Utah and Arkansas in there, maybe you have Baylor at 8. Maybe they fit in more there. But I still think if you look kind of outside the top 3, which I do think they got right at this time of the year when you're talking about Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, I think that's very fair. It's kind of up in the air with these other schools, and that top 10 is not really strong to me.
No, it's very weak.
It's very weak, but I also think they're missing, like, Clemson isn't ranked inside the top 10. Clemson.
I was just thinking about them.
Yeah, they're a top 10 team. But outside of that, I mean, it's kind of an interesting year. I think a lot of teams have a lot of question marks. And so for Baylor to be ranked anywhere from, honestly, 4 to about 10, I think it is the sweet spot right now, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. Good for them. I mean, these mean nothing really. It's good for off-season attention, and it's just, people's opinions. Obviously, just like we're giving ours here, it just seems a little jarring to see them as a top 5 team after, losing their quarterback, losing their receivers, losing their running backs, losing their top 2 defensive players and longtime captains. I mean, losing their entire secondary, basically. That's a lot. That's a lot of change, but I understand everybody's gone, through some change as well. So maybe it's just one of those years that's sort of wide open. But yeah, it makes sense when you look around them and you see like, oh yeah, I mean, they're totally capable of being better than those teams, but that does sound like a pretty weak pack of contenders. If you can barely even muster together a strong top 10.
Arkansas in the top 10 is fascinating, but I think for Baylor's purposes, they are going to have the best defensive line, offensive line combo in the Big 12. They'll probably have top 5 in the country in that regard. They're very deep at both positions. So I found that interesting. Now, we do have to talk about the other two really quick. Oklahoma State at 20 and Texas at 17. 17 after a 5-7 season. I find that to be very interesting. They are ahead of Oregon, Wisconsin, Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, BYU, Houston, Penn State, and Cincy. Do you think that's fair for the Longhorns after 5-7?
I mean, it's actually putting them probably where they should be more often than where they are put, in like the top 10 every year. Because maybe this year we'll be right, they've been saying for 15 years in a row now. Yeah, I mean, dude, the whole Texas, I mean, we're doing exactly what people do by putting Texas into their top 25s just to get people talking, That's why I'm surprised they're as low in that one as they are, because typically they overrate them even more to really get a, argument going. But, I mean, they have made a lot of changes. Like, if they're not, like, now they're starting to kind of do the thing where they're downplaying the expectations. And, after being overrated time and time and time again for the most part, now it's like, we've got probably more talent than we've had, and I know that's been the thing every year too, but we've gone and got all this talent, basically Alabama's second string, and then, they're going and getting Quinn Ewers, and they've got Bijan, and they've got Worthy, and they go and get like 2 of the top portal receivers, and I mean, they should be top 15, top 20. I mean, that should be a guarantee no matter what every single year for Texas. So I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think at some point they're going to have to be better than expectations say, and maybe that's this year. I'm not all in on they're just going to go win the Big 12 with all these additions right away, but I do think they should be better this year. If they're not better this year, I know there will be like, well, you got to give it time, but like they should be better this year. If they're not, dude, then that's alarming to me with all of the transfer changes they've made and those types of things. That would be worrisome to me if they are not significantly better this year.
I would agree with that. I do think they are a top 25 team. My issue is there's no way they should be ranked ahead of Oklahoma State at this time.
Don't think Oklahoma State's the 20th best team in the country. No, that's ridiculous.
And Texas should not be ahead of them. That's just kind of the main point of this is I do think Oklahoma State deserves to be in that top 3 after the season they just had and what they have returning. But yeah, Texas, very solid. They've added a lot. Now it's just a question of can this all-star team come together, and is Quinn Ewers actually really, really good, or is he just okay? Those are going to be some of the questions that need to be answered. I do think there's a high ceiling for this Texas team, but we say that every single year. They actually have to go out and put that on the football field. So we'll see. I still think they're a little bit soft on the offensive and defensive lines, which is a problem when you play in the Big 12. There are some really much more improved offensive and defensive line plays over the last 5 years. So we'll see if they can kind of adapt in that regard. But I did find it interesting. Number 17, I think they're more like 23 or 24, and I think Oklahoma State is more like 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd have Oklahoma State above them. Now, granted, they do still have Spencer Sanders, so that can either bump you up or bump you down, depending on what game you're watching on any given week. They're kind of quietly going through their offseason. They've sort of flown under the radar, I feel like, in terms of a news cycle. Lost obviously some key pieces. Malcolm Rodriguez, you were talking about when I walked in here a second ago.
Jim Knowles has gone to Ohio State.
Jim Knowles is gone. They lost Kobe Harville as well.
They did, and Tanner McAllister followed Jim Knowles.
So there's some pieces that are off that defense, and then their offense was just okay. Like, it was not even that great. It was, again, it's what Spencer Sanders are you getting? And that's a flip of the quarter, flip of the coin, basically. But, yeah, I would have them higher than Texas. They're deserving of that, but Oklahoma's rated way too high. And then outside of the rest of the Big 12, I think it's just kind of a crapshoot. I think you could throw just about anybody in at like 24, and I wouldn't really question it too much. I think this is a very interesting year. It's a lot of change is taking place, either coaches-wise or rosters-wise, and here's Baylor with the target on their back now, and they're set up pretty well. So this should be a fun season. It's just going to be hard to live up to last year. I mean, last year was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime type of seasons where not everything went right, but ultimately everything did go right that needed to, and it was just special. So if they can follow that up with anything similar, that would be a great sign for Dave Aranda and company. But it is going to be a very strange Big 12 and very curious Big 12 with still another 3 months to go for anybody out there in theory to change up even more between now and the opening kickoff. So that was it as far as Big 12 teams go?
That was it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, 4, I think that's about right. I think there's so many questions with the other teams in the Big 12. I think you and I pretty much agree on that. There are some teams that, could get in there at some point, but I think after spring ball, probably those 4 teams are the safest bets to win the Big 12 championship. So, yeah, it was an interesting conversation, though, to kind of see, how the media is kind of perceiving the Big 12, and to see Oklahoma and Baylor that high, whether deserving or not, is very fascinating.